All right, we start hour 2 here of this mega show on Bang the Book Radio, and we do that with Tony George, professional handicapper over at Doc Sports. Tony, how's it going today, man?
Pretty good. A couple of big heavyweights on the show today, Michaels and now George. You're getting them geared up for March Madness, aren't you, buddy?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. It's the only way we know how to do it here on Bang the Book Radio. And again, we'll do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday next week with all the games on Thursday in that first round. We'll get Tony on Tuesday again next week probably to get that full show on Tuesday of next week. But, Tony, let's start with the conference tournaments here because you mentioned to me in our email back and forth that you've got some very interesting stats, trends, angles, whatever you want to call them, about the buys in conference tournaments.
Yeah, I'll tell you something. First of all, a couple of things here. All these conference tournaments that your listeners are hanging on every word here, all these conference tournaments, there's not a lot of conferences, let's just say the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC are not real top-heavy. There's a lot of parity this year. And we keep bringing up that word. People keep thinking it's a handicap or cop-out when they're having a bad year. But at the end of the day, there is a ton of parity. And even if they're top-heavy, like the Big Ten, like Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, the ACC, Virginia, Duke, North Carolina, I think they're probably the best three in that one. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of parity between those top three teams, let alone the middle of the pack. And one thing that I've done in the past couple of years, Adam, and I don't have a clear-cut number, but I can guarantee you this is over a 60% angle. Everybody thinks, well, that's a great thing that Team A has a bye. Like the ACC tournament has a bunch of teams with byes. And that's an advantage to them. They can rest. I don't see it that way. And what I've been doing is, over the past 3 or 4 years now in these conference tournaments is a lot of times you're going to find, obviously, the higher seeds have a bye. How'd that work out for you in the Missouri Valley tournament? You know what? The teams that play the day before, are more prepared to play the following day than the team, quite frankly, that's laying double digits against them. Because they're going to be a high seed versus a low seed, and they're going to be laying a big number. And it takes them a while to get going. They're not familiar with the arena, how the rim bounces, soft or hard, or this and the other team has experience playing on that floor from the previous day. And what I've done is, it's not to say the Dukes of the world aren't going to beat a lower seed in the first round, but they're always laying a big number, and it takes them a while to get going. And what I've been doing when the number is right at them is bet the first half line with the underdog, catching a bunch of points. They're usually a double-digit or a high single-digit underdog at least, usually a double-digit underdog, and you could catch 5, 6, 7 points at halftime where they're coming out of the gate fresh. They played the day before. They're familiar with the surroundings. They've played these guys twice already this year, so they're not intimidated by them. And I've been able to find a lot of value in that first half line. Just hypothetical, Duke's playing – somebody like Wake, some bottom feeder or whatever. Although, about a week ago, Wake gave them all they wanted. But just an example, if the lower seed advances and Duke's laying 12, 13 points in a blowout, all Duke wants to do, bear in mind, or any big team, whether it's Kentucky or Michigan or, Texas Tech in the Big 12, all they want to do is get out of that first game with a win and get on to the second game. And a lot of times, their attitude going into that game is we're going to play it close to the vest. We're just going to play fundamentals. We're just going to play these guys and try and win the game. And you'll see that philosophy in the first half where they're still laying a huge number at the halftime line. And many times, and I mean many times, these lower seed teams not only are covering the spread, they're actually winning at halftime. And I bank this angle here probably the last 3 years in the right situations, and I can tell you I have cased a lot of tickets, and that's something you really want to look at.
Yeah, venue is so important, and also, I don't care if you're Duke, if you're North Carolina, if you're Virginia, if you're Texas Tech, I don't care who you are. there are still some nerves and some jitters when you talk about playing at this time of the year. You get rid of those when you play a game. When you haven't played a game yet, you're a little bit tight. You're trying to get into the flow of the game, as you mentioned. The arena atmosphere is a big deal. You talk about the ACC tournament specifically here. They're playing it at the Spectrum Center in Charlotte for the first time. So this is a brand new arena that these guys haven't played in yet. A lot of these teams play, the small conferences especially. You play in these tiny little barns that seat 3,000, 4,000 people. You're playing a conference tournament in a place that seats 15,000. Something like that. It takes you time to get acclimated to that. The shooting backdrops, the sight lines, all the different stuff. Some of these courts are sometimes elevated and the benches are kind of down a little bit. Just it's a different kind of feel. So I think you're definitely onto something there. And also, too, when you talk about Selection Sunday, there are no style points for winning games. They'll give teams credit for a close loss, but there's no style points for winning games. That's black and white. If you're a team that has a close loss on the road at Duke, the committee goes, okay, well, they played tough there. So there's no style points for winning. It's just, as you said, win and get out. And sometimes it's hard to get into the flow of the game in the first half with that mentality.
Yeah, and I think until today, or until tonight, with Gonzaga, and you've got Wright State playing Northern Kentucky. It's the first time any of these number one seeds have reached a conference championship game so far, and that's an interesting statistic. And all these lower seed teams, that aren't going to make the NCAA tournament. Some of them will make the NIT or the CIT or whatever they are. But there's a lot of seniors on the floor, and they've been getting beat up by the Kentuckys and the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the Kansases, and their entire career. And this is their one last time to try and stick it up their rear, so to speak, and they're going to play over their heads. And these lower seeds, cover a lot of numbers, and you want to pick and choose your spots wisely. The one thing, more than anything else, and we'll talk about it when we're breaking down the other two conference tournaments you want to talk about, but you want to look for reasons to take these underdogs. There's going to be, I'll give you a perfect example of what March Madness is going to be. A perfect example for everybody listening. The Iowa-Nebraska game on Sunday. Iowa had a 14-point lead with 6 minutes left and a 7-point lead with 40 seconds left, and lost in overtime to a team that has no bench and no business even being in a game with a team that's won 20-some games. That's March Madness wrapped up in a nutshell. So you want to manage your expectations and look for reasons while these lower-seeded teams, are going to beat somebody outright. Just bear in mind, the Missouri Valley Conference, the number 5 seed won the tournament. They had no chance of going to the big dance. Bradley did. None. Zero. No chance. They won the tournament outright. So, and they punched their tickets. So bear in mind, it's going to be a risky, you want to, the low volume approach and looking for these different angles you can to gain some value against the line.
Well, and I think one last point to make here before we break down the Big 12 and the Big 10, talking about first half betting, and I know you've done a lot with derivative betting in the NBA, and you've had a lot of success with that as well. Over the course of a college basketball game, we'll use the ACC as an example here, over 70 or 72 possessions, Duke is the better team in each one of those possessions. And it starts to add up as you get to the full game. Well, over 32 or 33 possessions in the first half or whatever it may be, there's a lot more variance involved with that, which is why when you talk about these teams that have played a game against a Duke team that hasn't, there's an even higher percentage chance of variance and probably negative variance for that better team, which is why these first half opportunities make so much sense. Really, it's a situational handicapping element overall.
Yeah, and that's the one thing a lot of people, if you're a recreational bettor, and it's March Madness, I'm going to come to Vegas, I'm taking $2,000 with me, and that's what I'm willing to lose to have a good time. That's a sucker. That's a schnook. I get on a plane before I moved out here. I couldn't wait to get out here because I knew I was going to win a bunch of money. These guys are willing to lose. And the one to lose is they don't expand. They're going ahead and they're betting a 1-course meal. I'm betting a 3 or 4-course meal. I'm betting first of all, I'm going to bet into the first half. Then I'm going to come and see what the second half line is, side and total, and different things you can do. Of course, that's, it's ready. Halftime lines and first half lines are readily available anywhere if you're wagering offshore. But here in Vegas, we have apps, and you're at the book, and it's easier to do, obviously, somewhat. But at the end of the day, you want to look at all the options you have to give you the best chance of winning, because as your previous caller alluded to, your previous guest, there are certain teams in these Power 5 conferences that are already in the tournament. They are not going to blow their brains out, trying to win a conference tournament, playing 3 games in 4 days against the most elite competition in the country and kill themselves, because 4 days later they got to turn around and go play, in the NCAA tournament on a neutral floor against a team that's looking at them like they're the freaking Super Bowl. David and Goliath, Virginia, Baltimore County last year. These teams are lying in wait. The smaller conference tournaments, for the most part, a lot of them are already over. They're going to be well rested, well prepared, lots of film study. So you want to also, determine a team's motivation, especially, see how flat they come out, this, that, and the other. And so there's some different derivatives you can do during the game to wager for or against what you're seeing. And you need to utilize, more than just, I'm just going to bet, I'm just going to lay the 7.5 with Miami today because Wake sucks. If you do that, you're going to lose money.
One last point here. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole with this, but you mentioned the apps. If you're somebody going out there for conference tournaments here this week or March Madness next week, land at McCarran, get an Uber, check in, drop your bag off, whatever you want to do. Go to where you're going to bet. Whatever set of properties you're going to bet at, set up the app immediately. Make that your first item of business in town. Avoid the long lines, hit the first halves of the best numbers, hit the second halves when they come out, because if you want to hit a second half and you don't have an app, you're not going to do it because the line's going to be too damn long. So set up your apps immediately when you get out there. And I'm sure, Tony, that was something, you already had them anyway before you even moved out there. But wherever you didn't have one, I'm sure that's the first thing you did.
Yes, it's absolutely. And the thing about those two on those halftime lines on these apps, you want to watch them because they react very quickly to what's being bet. There was an NBA game, and I can't remember the two teams. I'm sitting up here at my local watering hole, and, of course, I found a little sports bar, hole-in-the-wall dive bar. That's how I roll as a human being. I love dive bars, but everybody there that hangs out in this place is like a local, and they're an action junkie, and at this point they know who I am. I've been out here almost 8 months, but we were watching the game. Halftime line opened up at 1.5 on an NBA game, and within 5 minutes it was up to 4.5. So assess what you're seeing, and make a decision. And there's apps like the Score app or whatever, you can look at in-game stats. They're shooting 22% from 3. They're shooting 34% from the floor. The other team's shooting 48. You can do some, quick math in your head of how things are going, and at the end of the day, you can wager what you've seen plus those stats real time right on your phone. But when you decide to make a decision, the value goes out of it very quickly. They open it up, and then these books react quickly to where the money's coming in, and you see dramatic line swings within 3 or 4 or 5 minutes of the opening line versus the closing line on the app betting. So you want to stay on top of that. But, yes, if you're sitting down at Westgate watching the ACC semifinals and finals on Saturday and Sunday, or the Big Ten or any conference tournaments, you want to go place a bet at halftime, you're probably not going to get your bet in. You got to have an app. It's at William Hill, CG, Stations, Westgate, wherever you're watching them, any place that you're going to wager has an app. So be sure and download that and wager smart, because remember, while you're betting games, the bottom line is you're betting a number. Get yourself the best number.
All right, so we take a look at the Big 12 Conference Tournament here at the Sprint Center, as always, in Kansas City, Missouri. First time since 2005 that Kansas has not been the number 1 seed. They are the number 3 seed here. Texas Tech, the tournament favorite, is the 2 seed at plus 120. Kansas State, the number 1 seed, plus 365. Kansas plus 380. What do you think here about the Big 12 Conference Tournament, Tony?
Well, don't bet Kansas. I can tell you that right now. You know, I like to look, and we talked about this a week ago, just briefly on your show. We were talking about March Madness and conference tournaments and what you look for. I think we were specifically talking about the Missouri Valley Conference, where I think both of our opinions were wrong. But, of course, Drake lost their best player in the semifinals, which, you know, the first game out, actually, the McClure went down, and that killed their chances. But at the end of it, we talked about road records, neutral site records. How have they done away from home? Only 2 teams in the Big 12 have winning road records, and that is Kansas State and Texas Tech. Interesting, too, that not only Kansas State have only one of the 2 teams in the conference that has a winning road record, they are 4-0 straight up and against the spread on neutral site games this year. Kansas State, I think, should be the number 1 seed. They're going to have a partisan crowd there at the Sprint Center. Manhattan's about 4 hours away. This is one of the first times I can remember that I haven't went down to this tournament because I lived in Kansas City until this year. But whenever you're in there, the place is packed with either Kansas or K-State fans. And the other team that travels extremely well down there that gives them a distinct advantage is Iowa State. Iowa State travels well. You can't walk into a bar in downtown Kansas City or Westport or Power and Light District down there where every bar is not completely full of Iowa State fans. I've never seen anything like it. It's always been like that. But I really think that one of the top 3 teams here probably is going to win this. Kansas, I'm telling you this year, 3-8 on the road. They don't have good guard play. They get beat up down low. If they're outside of Lawrence, Kansas, they're just not the same team. I would not put a lot of stock into Kansas in this tournament. It's going to come down to Texas Tech or K-State, and I think maybe a wild card in this tournament possibly could be Iowa State. I don't see Texas, Baylor, Oklahoma, although Oklahoma's a good cover team. TCU, 30-1. You know, obviously West Virginia hasn't won. They're 0-10 on a Bob Huggins team. Adam, a Bob Huggins team is 0-10 on the road in conference play. A Bob Huggins team. I mean, that's unbelievable. I think it's down to Kansas State, Texas Tech, and I think it's probably what you're going to see your final as.
Now, unlike a lot of conference tournaments here, I mean, we've got one where the TCU-Oklahoma State winner plays at 6 o'clock Central, turns around, plays at 3 o'clock Central on Thursday. Other than that, we don't really have any big scheduling advantages, as we've seen a lot of other conferences, you know, much like the number 1 seed and the scheduling advantage they get in the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament. From attending this thing a lot, Tony, I mean, are there any game-by-game angles you can think of? I mean, is this a tough backdrop for shooters? Is this, you know, you mentioned the crowd advantages. Anything on a game-by-game basis that you're looking to take advantage of?
Anytime I get a short turnaround and Team A is playing a really good team, you want to take a look at that if the number's manageable. It's no different than the regular season, except it's on a less than 24-hour turnaround, meaning scheduling spots. You know, and if you play late and then play mid-afternoon, you know, and then you need to take a look at how the teams played each other during the regular season. You know, there's a lot of overall trends that people look at. You know, season-long trends. They're 19-7 ATS, off a win of 5 or more points, and all this crap that you can look at. It's right here, right now. But one thing about conference action, there are just certain teams in conference that play other teams very, very tough every time they play, no matter what the record is. You know, and they more times than not, whether they're in the underdog role or not, they're covering spreads. They might even beat them outright. So some of those, what I call conference trends between two teams, you know, you'll look at those. But at the end of the day, yeah, you're looking for some situational spots. But again, you know, if you have a full 24 hours, so you play at 7 at night, You win, you got to go take on Virginia or Duke or Kansas State or Texas Tech at 2 in the afternoon. That's a distinct disadvantage for that team. But if it's a full 24-hour turnaround, and then all of a sudden, like we alluded to earlier, you're seeing that top seed laying 12 or 13 or 10, you might want to take a look at that halftime line with the underdog.
All right, so we move to the Big Ten Conference tournament here, which returns to the United Center in Chicago, Illinois. Very happy to see this after this conference tournament the last couple of years has been at the Verizon Center in D.C. and then Madison Square Garden, which never really made any sense to me. I mean, Rutgers, your only member school, really out that way. I guess Maryland to a lesser degree. But now we're back at the UC here in Chicago. Michigan State, the favorite, and the number 1, plus 170. Michigan, the 3 seed, but the second favorite, plus 185. Purdue, the 2 seed, plus 335. This is a top-heavy conference to a degree, but also the teams in the middle are all pretty good, and we saw some upsets late in the year. So the Big Ten tournament, I mean, is this kind of a riddle for you this year?
A little bit of a riddle. Enigma wrapped in a riddle. You know, we all know that Michigan State, Purdue, and Michigan are the best teams. I mean, Purdue, to me, has been a little bit of a misnomer. They're undefeated. Purdue was the only undefeated team in the conference at home. They were 500 on the road and 500 on neutral floors. And, you know, Purdue, how Edwards goes is how the team goes. You know, they rely a lot on him. You know, Michigan State missing a few key players during the year. Obviously, 8-4 on the road. They had the best road conference, and they were 2-1 on neutral floors. So they were 10-5. You know, away from home in general here. But a couple of teams you want to keep your eye on here is Wisconsin and Maryland. You know, both of them had winning road records. Wisconsin was 8-5 on the road, 2-1 on neutral floors. You know, covered 16 out of 31 games. You know, they can play defense. Happ's a great player. You know, Maryland, I think, is a dangerous team. You know, let me tell you something. Nobody wants to play Maryland because if they're hitting shots, they're tough to beat. You know, and here's a team, again, with a winning road record. So I think out of between Maryland, Wisconsin, Michigan, Purdue, and Michigan State, you know, then you got to ask yourself a question. How much does Michigan State, Purdue, and Michigan want to put into this? Because they're going to be top 4 seeds, all 3 of them, 4 seed or less or better in the tournament. How much do they want to blow their brains out here to try and win this? You know, they're already in the NCAA tournament where I think Wisconsin, Maryland probably playing for a higher seed in the tournament might give them a little bit of an easier route in March Madness and not have to draw a superpower in round 1. So they're going to be gunning to win this tournament. So I think this is anybody's ball game here. I wouldn't have counted out Iowa, but what happened against Nebraska there, that's going to leave a bad taste in their mouth. I'm not so sure how they're going to react to that in the tournament. But one thing I can tell you for sure, Adam, you're going to want to take it. We're talking about all the teams that can win it. Let's talk about a team that can't win it. And that team that can't win it that you might want to look to fade out of the gate, you got 2 of them, Illinois and Northwestern. First of all, Illinois, 1-9 on the road and 1-5 on neutral floors. So, you know, you might want to take a look at fading them. Take a look at the lower tier teams to see how they've done on the road and who they're playing and what their scenario was for the season. You know, I give none of those schools, Penn State, Illinois, Nebraska, Northwestern, Rutgers. Indiana's played well as of late, which might be a team, if they're catching the right number, they might be a team that you might want to grab a bunch of points on for some reason or another after losing 12 in a row and 13 out of 14. They just turn around and play like they were at the beginning of the year, Adam. Speaking of an enigma wrapped in a riddle, I cannot put my finger on Indiana right now other than they might give somebody a ball game in this tournament.
Hell, Indiana beat Michigan State twice in the regular season, and that's who they'd run into in the quarterfinals if they beat Ohio State. 11:30 a.m. Central Time for that game on Thursday. Same thing for Friday. So very early start for Michigan State on Friday, not having played a game. Indiana having played that early game, they should beat Ohio State because the Buckeyes are in shambles right now. That's an interesting one there where Indiana could very well knock off Michigan State. And I like that you brought up the motivation for these teams. You know, In a one-bid league, everybody is motivated. Or in a league hoping to become a two-bid league, everybody's motivated. Well, here you figure Michigan's probably motivated winning back-to-back conference tournaments. Is Michigan State, with the injuries that they have? I don't know. Purdue hasn't won this since 2009. You got to think they'd like to get one of these here at some point. So motivation, a big factor in these multi-bid conference tournaments where some teams may go balls out and some teams, may just kind of get some cold weather shrinkage and just kind of tuck it away.
Yeah, and you look at teams like, and just based on your analysis there in that scenario, one thing that Tom Izzo has problems with this year is depth and bringing in rotation players that are still productive. He's top-heavy in the starting five. Obviously, they're one of our best players, went out for the season, but they don't have a lot of depth. So you ask yourself a question. Tom Izzo is one of the best coaches in college, bar frickin' none. He doesn't have too many equals. He figures out, he's like a Bill Belichick. He does more with less than anybody else in the conference. He's always got good guard play, fundamentally sound basketball team, do all the little things very well. Very rarely, and I mean very rarely, does Michigan State beat themselves. Very rarely. That's why they've got a bunch of titles and they're always in the hunt. But he has lack of depth. Does he want to blow his brains out and wear his team down with no depth and 4 days later turn around and go on a neutral floor and play in the NCAA tournament against maybe a 10 or a 9 seed? Probably not. I don't think his motivation's there. You might want to look to fade them a little bit here, depending on the number, Adam.
Tony George, professional handicapper over at Docs Sports. What's going on over at Docs right now, Tony?
Well, I'll tell you what, we're still just destroying it in the NBA. I can tell you that right now, 44 and 23 run, and got a big top play tonight. Got a game of the week tonight. It's a 6-unit play. We've hit 6 out of our last 7 top plays of 5 units or more. It's over at Docs. It's guaranteed. Check it out. Obviously, early bird discounts for Major League Baseball. We were up 144 units last year. In Major League Baseball, we're up 112 units in the NBA year to date. So we're doing good in these sports. Get over to Docs, check it out. Also, March Madness betting tips video on my YouTube page. I give you a bunch of tips and techniques I use in March Madness. Be sure and get over to my YouTube page. Just type in my name /Doc Sports and we had a tumultuous college basketball season. I've always been transparent on your show, Adam. Always told it the way it was, win, lose, or draw. Hasn't been a great season in college basketball for me. I think we're down around 12 units on the season. But the postseason is a different animal. We got postseason on sale over there for 50% off. So be sure and get over to Docs and check it out. There's a ton of free stuff over there as well.
Tony George, professional handicapper over at Docs Sports. You can follow him on Twitter at TGeorgeSports, and, of course, check him out on YouTube. Tony, appreciate the time as always, man. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next week.
You bet. March Madness is here, baby. Let's get it done.